Alright guys, welcome back to Swanye Nerd. I'm going to show you how to make these awesome Pokemon Go themed keychains. That way everybody knows what team you're on whenever you're out in the streets hunting for Pokemon. So I'm going to show you today how to make the Team Instinct one, mainly because that was the hardest one for me to make with Zapdos' rough edges and points. So that's what we're going to get into. So some things you're going to need are a cutting board. You're going to want a big one. This template, which you can find on my blog. You're going to need 2 to make at least 1 keychain. You're going to need some wax paper. You're also going to need some air dry clay, mine's Crayola, and make sure that you know all the different techniques so that it doesn't crack. You're also going to need these little plastic baggies to hold your clay in, and a highlighter or a rolling pin, and also a ruler. You're also going to need a spray bottle filled with water, as well as a X-Acto knife, and a sewing needle. Don't forget to bring some paper towels, that way you can wipe your hands off. You're also going to need some duct tape, as well as some eye pins. You can get this at any craft store. I'm using a medium size here. You're going to need a couple cups. I have 3 of them here. You're going to need a paper plate and some water. You'll need some paint. I have black and yellow here for Zapdos, and then also a small paintbrush. Okay, so now you're going to take a little bit of that clay and you're going to roll it up and put it into this little baggie here so that it doesn't dry up while you're using it. I went on Crayola.com to make sure that I knew how big I had to make all my stuff, and you need to use at least a quarter of an inch in order to make it so that the stuff doesn't crack. Okay, so I didn't record it, but you're going to have to put down a template and then some wax paper. And then you have to roll out your clay and put it at the thickness that you need it to be. And then you put it over the logo that you want to use, so mine being Zapdos. And then you put another layer of wax paper on, and then another template, and then another layer of wax paper down. And then you have to tape all of that down so that none of it moves. This is so that you can see your design while you're poking holes in it, and then you can take the clay out and then cut it from there. So all we're doing here is using the needle, and we're going to poke holes everywhere that you don't see the black body of Zapdos. You don't have to worry about the outer edge kind of stuff. We're going to work with that later. But just make sure that you poke everywhere. That way when you take the clay out, you can see the full outline of Zapdos, and that's going to help you determine where to make your final cuts with your X-Acto knife. So right here, you're going to do the same thing, except you're kind of doing it with your X-Acto knife. You're going to kind of trace along with your needle, that way you can see where you need to make the final cut. And then carefully cut along the edges with your X-Acto knife. If something happens to fall off, which it will here in a second, then just try to smush it back on. And if it falls off later, then it's better then, because that way we can glue it back on and you're not going to notice later on. But if you smush it back on now, then you're going to be able to keep the shape that you want it to be so that it fits back on later. So once you have everything cut out like this, you're going to go ahead and try to mold it around so that it looks like the shape that I have for you in the bottom right corner. And don't forget to apply water, because the clay will start drying as soon as it reaches contact with air. So you're going to want to occasionally massage in a little bit of water. That way it's a little bit easier to work with. But don't apply too much, because then more things will break. So go ahead and cut things down so they're proportional and to size, and then you can cut out the entire thing of wax paper. What you're going to do is to lay it down on a flat surface, cover it up with a cup, and leave it to sit for about 8 hours until it hardens. And after about 8 hours, then you can come back and kind of like scratch in the little details where it would normally be black on the thing. And so that includes like the feathers around its neck and its beak, and also the ones connecting its body to its tail. So go ahead and scratch those in. Try not to be too rough that you're going to break it, but also don't be so gentle that you're not going to be able to see it. We have to paint over these lines, so if it's too thin, you're not going to be able to see it underneath the paint. And if it's too hard, you're going to break it, and then it's going to just go to crap. So be careful when doing this. If you happen to break off a little bit too much of something, don't worry, just set that piece aside, and the next step is to take some tacky glue. Sorry I didn't show it in the beginning. And then you're just going to stick it back on. I'd end up doing this to the bottom tail part and also to the left wing. So just try to stick it back on as neatly as possible, and then we're going to paint over it later anyways, and nothing's going to show like it was broken. So now we're going to start with the base. You're going to take a little bit more clay, and then you're going to roll it out to the thickness that you need again. Again, mine's 1/4 of an inch. And then you're going to place your Zapdos on top of that so you know how big you actually have to cut it. And then you're going to cut out this like arrowhead kind of shape. And so that's going to leave you with place for the Zapdos to fit, and also for the little edge spots to fit as well. There's 3 pieces. There's the one below its tail, and then the 2 little pieces above its wing. So you're going to go ahead and make sure that your base is going to be big enough to fit not only your Zapdos, but also those little pieces. So just kind of don't really eyeball it, but you can use your ruler to like straighten out edges and just kind of work with it until you get a shape that you need. The next part is the eye pin. You're just going to take it and stick it straight down through it. If it comes through at the front, like mine kind of did, you can cover it up with a little bit more clay, or just take it out and stick it back down again. And then you're going to start to make the little edge pieces. So I just kind of lined it up with Zapdos' wings, that way I knew how wide I needed to make them basically. And then just kind of finagle it until you really get the shape that you need. It's longer on the top part and then shorter at the bottom part. It wasn't exactly the angle of the wings. The wings were kind of more horizontal than diagonal, so it wasn't exact, but that's okay. I think it looks alright just how it went. And try to make them as even as possible. You don't want one to be super short and the other to be kind of long, like mine was here. But it kind of evens itself out later on. So just keep working with it until you get the right shapes. Once everything's cut and it's fitting in place, you can go ahead and take them out and leave them to dry like we did with the Zapdos thing. Cover it up with a cup. Only don't spray the little pieces because they're going to fall apart later on. So just be careful with those, but you can spray the bigger piece. So now your Zapdos body should be completely dry, so go ahead and take your needle and make sure your scratchings are deep enough. The next step is to paint, so we're going to have to make sure that everything will fit together properly. So just make sure everything fits on your base part here, just like it did when it was drying. So now you're going to start painting. I got this yellow, and I'm just going to cover the entire Zapdos body in just a base coat. And just, it has to be a really light coat, that way you can still get the different scratches and stuff on it. Don't layer it on too much. So I did the front and then the 3 sides. Once you have the Zapdos body done, go ahead and paint the 3 little pieces. You're going to cover the front and then the sides as well. You don't have to cover the back because that's going to be glued down to the base anyways. We're going to paint the base black. As you can see, mine's not completely dry, so the clay is going to absorb a little bit more paint. That means you're just going to have to do a couple more layers, but that's okay. As you can see, it's a little streaky in the front, and it's going to be on these sides too until it actually completely dries. But it's okay to paint it while it's still a little bit wet, but don't do it while it's like just right as soon as you're done with it. And then I'm going to go in with the black on the Zapdos scratchings. As you can see, it looks really thick right now, but we're going to go back in later with the yellow again. That way we can thin out the lines. And then just keep applying coats to the black. That way you can get all the streaks out. And you're going to do this to all the sides of it. I'm only recording those 2 sides here. And so now we're just going to thin out those lines there. Just be very careful when doing this so that you don't thin it out too much and have to go back in it with a black. You're just going to go along the edges, thinning out the scratching paint. Once the paint's dry, you're just about done. You're going to go ahead and position all your stuff onto your base. And then you're going to go ahead and take some more of that tacky glue and just glue everything down into place. While it's drying, we're going to move on to the keyring part. You're going to need some chain, some jump rings, and also a key ring and some pliers. So I counted 14 links and I cut on the 14th one, so there's actually 13 there. And then I'm going to attach both sides to different jump rings. One of the jump rings will be attached to the eye ring that's on your pendant. And then the other one's going to be attached to the key ring, and they're both going to be sealed shut, so that way you have a fully attached keychain. And that's it. That's your fully built Team Instinct keychain. Let me know in the comments which team you are. I'm personally Team Valor. If you want to see me do the other 2 teams, then go ahead and like this video and leave a comment. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.